Hey everybody, thank you for taking time out of your mornings, afternoons, or evenings to attend today's webinar, which is how to achieve PCI DSS compliance on AWS. My name is Scott Ward. I'm a solutions architect with Amazon Web Services, and I'm going to be your overall host and moderator for today's webinar. And let's go ahead and meet who the rest of our panel is today. So besides myself, we're also going to have Ryan Leatherberry, who is a product manager from AlienVault, and Ryan's going to be speaking with us a little bit later, as well as Jason Harper, who is the CEO and founder of CeloPay, who's going to give us some awesome insights into how an actual AWS customer was able to achieve their security profiles using a partner solution and AWS. So a couple of things around our agenda today. We're going to take some time. We're going to talk about security on AWS in general, level set, and make sure that everybody's on the same page here. Talk about AlienVault, their USM Anywhere product for AWS workloads, deep dive into CeloPay and what they've been able to achieve on AWS and with AlienVault, and then we'll leave some time for Q&A and discussion at the end of the time. Quick objectives that we're going to hopefully target here today are how AWS enables you to build a secure platform. Talk about how AlienVault can really help you simplify your security monitoring and compliance on AWS. And one of the things that I really like is how quickly you can get up and running with that. And then talk about how AWS and AlienVault customer, how CeloPay was really able to transform their compliance efforts around PCI and DSS with that AlienVault USM Anywhere product. All right, so let's get my part going here. We're going to talk a little bit about security and compliance on AWS in general, and help set the stage for the AlienVault and the CeloPay story. So to start with, your data and your intellectual property are your most valuable assets. So you as a customer have things that differentiate you as a company, things that make you who you are, and they're the things that you want to be protecting the most. And through some various studies, they found that the average cost of a data breach is about $6.5 million. The increase in theft of hard intellectual property is continuing to rise, and it's risen about 56% in recent times. And a real big one is that customers have indicated that they will actually avoid businesses following a security breach. In fact, through one recent study, 70% of consumers said they would actually avoid those companies. And what this really boils down to is that any sort of a breach or a compromise of your assets that define you as a business can have a significant and long-term impact on you as a business, and that would take you a long time to recover from, and really take you away from focusing on improving your product, which is what you really want to be doing on a daily basis, because that's ultimately what differentiates you. So maintaining a very good security profile and focusing on that is very important, as the consequences can be significant. So when we talk about AWS, we really like to think that you can actually be more secure than in your existing environment. And there's several reasons here. One of these is around automated logging and monitoring. You have the ability to have a massive amount of data available to you as far as what's happening with your workloads on AWS, monitoring around API calls that are happening, monitoring around what's happening with the various services you're using, all that delivered to you, and then the ability to actually have automation in place that is consuming those log files and taking action based on that, calling other APIs to garner more information or to actually take action on what maybe is defined as a particular security event. You're able to simplify your resource access, so everything in AWS is based on an API. So whether you're using the management console and you're clicking through and configuring things, or you're using the AWS command line interface or the software development kit, all of this is through API access. And we start talking about the command line interface and the software development kit, you have a lot of opportunities for automation and helping to ensure that things are done in a consistent way and that they ultimately live up to your security profiles. We make it very easy to encrypt properly. So on AWS, you're able to implement the encryption that you want. So what that means to the customer is you can encrypt all your data before you even give it to AWS, and you have full ownership of those keys. You can use AWS services to perform the encryption for you, or use some sort of a mix where maybe you're uploading your keys, your own keys, into an AWS encryption service to help with that encryption. There's lots of different ways you can do that, and we try to make that as easy as possible, because we encourage our customers, wherever possible, to actually encrypt and have protection and ownership of their data. And then the ability to enforce strong authentication. So you can continue to tie your access to your AWS account into your corporate directory to help ensure that your users are using a consistent username and password configuration, and that they're going up against corporate standards. You can tie your access to AWS in with identity providers so that you are using a kind of a single sign-on approach. You can implement multi-factor authentication with those identity providers, or even with your actual named AWS users to help ensure that you are practicing that kind of multi-factor, multiple credentials approach for accessing your resources. So when we talk about AWS, one of the really key things to understand is the shared responsibility model. So when it comes to security on AWS, no one party is fully responsible for security. The customer has some responsibility and AWS has some responsibility. So on the AWS side, we have responsibility for that global infrastructure, the physical facilities where the infrastructure that runs AWS is located all around the world, as well as those foundational services around compute and storage and database and networking. These are kind of the core things that AWS has responsibility for when it comes to security. And then when it comes to a customer, the customer gets to control their security configuration in the cloud. It starts with enabling any AWS specific security configurations that they may have available to them. And then customers get to determine what they're going to implement for network security, what they're going to implement for identity and access control, both for AWS and for their applications, define how they're going to do inventory and configuration management, how they're going to actually encrypt their data both at rest and in transit. And most importantly, customers own their applications and their content. So any applications that a customer installs on AWS, they have full ownership of the security of that application, as well as knowing who can log into that application and what they can do in that application, as well as the actual core content and data that a customer is storing. Customers get to control how they're storing that data, which AWS service it is housed in. They also are responsible for understanding who can access that data and knowing how they're actually going to protect and encrypt that data. So when we talk about AWS, we talked about the monitoring a little bit more here, is what you can actually do to constantly monitor your environment. So there's lots of AWS services that give you that visibility. You know what's going on in your account. Think about AWS as kind of your new data center, and you need to know what's going on at all times. AWS CloudShare will actually monitor and record all of the API calls that are happening against your AWS account. Amazon Inspector will actually assess your applications for vulnerabilities. VPC flow logs will actually give you details about traffic that is flowing in and out of your VPC, and if that traffic was actually accepted or denied, so you can have visibility into who or what your applications or services are talking to or with from your VPC. AWS Config actually gives you an inventory of your AWS account as far as the services that you're using in your account and visibility into changes of those services. So you know when changes have happened, and you can actually go back in time and see what has actually happened with these services. As I mentioned before, you have full control over your data, and it starts with the geographic location of your data. So there's 16 different AWS regions that currently exist that have 44 different availability zones that give you the ability to have a lot of high availability and fault tolerance for running your workloads in a region, and it also gives you the ability, to kind of control where your data resides. So if you have some sort of compliance or regulatory requirements, you can determine which AWS region makes the most sense for you as far as where you're going to store your data. Services like AWS Shield actually will help you to protect your applications and your infrastructure from DDoS type attacks. And you have the ability to implement server-side or client-side encryption to help best protect the data that you're storing in AWS. You also have the ability to kind of integrate with your own, your existing resources. You don't have to completely shift and throw everything away that you may already be using. So if you have Active Directory or some sort of an LDAP solution, you can still continue to integrate your applications that you're running in AWS with that, as well as what I mentioned before, access to your actual AWS account through some sort of a federation or single sign-on approach can also still be integrated with your existing Active Directory solutions. We have the ability to use dedicated connections to kind of get a secure low latency extension to your existing data center. This is AWS Direct Connect, so you can have a high-speed, consistent pipe all the way from your data center to AWS if you're taking kind of a hybrid type strategy. You can use your own encryption keys if you choose to protect your data, and you can implement partner security solutions. in the customer portion of that shared responsibility model. I think that's really important because it allows customers to ultimately be able to achieve the security profile that they're looking to achieve when they're running in the AWS cloud. And so one of the reasons that we have that security discussions with our customers a lot is that they have compliance requirements that they need to meet. We have millions of customers running in the enterprise, the startup, and the public sector space, and the pockets of these are dealing with various industries that require compliance, and that the applications and the workloads and the data are treated against the requirements of those compliance bodies. So on the AWS side, what we've done is we've actually gone and worked with these compliance organizations to ensure that the bottom part of the shared responsibility model, which is the AWS portion, actually meets their requirements. So we are working with these third-party organizations and with third-party auditors to verify that we are meeting the requirements. So we have 70 plus services, over 3,000 audit requirements, over 2,600 controls, and over 7,700 artifacts that help to ensure that the AWS portion of the shared responsibility model is meeting their compliance requirements. And what that does is that it then enables us to be able to show you as a customer what we're doing. So we make it very easy to actually find out how we're meeting those compliance requirements through the AWS Management Console. It's a service called Artifact. You can simply search for compliance reports and actually be able to download and see how we are doing against the compliance requirements for that particular compliance organization, so that you can get comfortable with how we're doing things and feel more comfortable with actually running your workloads on top of AWS. And what that allows you to do is actually build an end-to-end compliance solution. So because AWS has already gone through all the part of securing and ensuring that the bottom part is compliant, you can implement your solutions on top of the AWS platform, do the necessary work that you have to do to meet the requirements at your level as far as your application and how you're treating your data, and be able to have a fully compliant solution. And once again, you can leverage partner solutions that'll help you achieve that security profile as part of ensuring that you are compliant when running on AWS. So, an example here is that AlienVault clearly fits into this top part of the shared responsibility model, helping customers to implement the controls and the monitoring that they need for what they're running on AWS. And with that, I'm going to let Ryan step in here and help us understand a little bit more about how AlienVault fits into that model and what it offers for our customers.
Okay, thanks so much, Scott. Great overview. So, as you mentioned, I'm going to now focus specifically on PCI compliance in AWS using AlienVault USM Anywhere. Okay, so, this backing up a little bit, PCI, I'm sure most of you are aware, you wouldn't be on this webinar, but just as background and context, organizations that process, store, or transmit credit card information, they have very strict PCI DSS regulations. Failure to comply can result in some really stiff penalties, and they're actually imposed daily. And as Scott pointed out, a data breach resulting from noncompliance could cost millions in settlements, legal fees, loss of reputation. Customers don't want to do business with you. Not a good thing. So when you look at PCI, there's actually 6 domains, and these are broken out into 12 requirements, which in turn break out into many different controls. And we need to be able to comply with all these. These requirements are based on security policies and guidelines for storage and processing and transmitting the data. But unfortunately for many of us, and a lot of organizations, compliance is hard and expensive because PCI objectives require multiple solutions, and it can be difficult to know which tools you actually really need. And it doesn't help that organizations are often racing to get ready for the next fast-approaching PCI audit. So with that in mind, fortunately, AlienVault Unified Security Management provides everything you need to get ready for your next PCI DSS audit in one affordable, easy-to-use solution. It combines the essential security technologies you need to demonstrate compliance. These include the items you see here, including asset discovery, vulnerability assessment, log management, and file integrity monitoring, for instance. But let's start with the beginning, asset discovery. So in PCI, there's a requirement that you identify all the systems that are in scope to your cardholder data environment. USM takes care of this by automatically discovering and inventorying all your critical on-premise and cloud assets. You can define custom PCI asset groups within USM that you can use to run vulnerability scans and reporting. these asset groups, way to lump these assets together, specifically in AWS, where they can be based on instances, work with an elastic environment. So, what we see is these instances are automatically added and removing based on auto-scale policies. Asset groups can track right with those. The next objective is to maintain a vulnerability management program. So the vulnerability scans are called out in several different requirements in PCI. And this is another area where USM does provide internal PCI compliance for vulnerability scan capabilities, so you can detect vulnerabilities as part of your compliance and security program. Then when you layer this with the intrusion detection requirements, it does also provide this IDS system that monitors traffic at critical points in the card, in the data environment. And we take a multi-layered approach to intrusion detection. So we've got out-of-box intrusion detection for NIS if you do have some on-premise. Host intrusion detection, you certainly need to be on the host to see certain types of threats, and then also tailored to cloud environments like AWS, of course. And then behavioral monitoring, these are things like checking suspicious activity, like an AWS user making repeated attempts to perform a task that he doesn't have permission for. And then finally, it wouldn't be complete without SIM event correlation. So, capturing user and system activities on critical systems and correlating, figuring out are login attempts valid, are they invalid, so you always know who is attempting to access that cardholder environment. Okay, so why, again, just to wrap this up, we talked about the 5 key areas of USM Anywhere. Why does USM Anywhere make life easier when you're faced with a PCI event? A big part of this is just streamlining compliance and security with one solution. So, unlike other PCI compliant software, it can take as little as a day to deploy USM platform for compliance management. As Scott mentioned, that was one of the things he really liked, was how easy it is to get up and running. You can centralize the monitoring of your AWS environment. That helps you achieve PCI compliance faster. And then, you've got to ensure this continuous security and compliance, this ongoing monitoring of your environments, because obviously life doesn't begin and end with that audit. It's about preparing for the next one, because they're going to keep coming at us. And another key thing is, the log storage requirements. So PCI mandates that you retain audit history for at least a year, with a minimum of 3 months to be immediately available for analysis. And so this, we built this in from the start with this in mind. So this is why the USM platform has an option to store data online for 90 days by default, and then you can easily search and report on it to meet your compliance needs. It also provides by default 12 months of cold storage for your logs. You can extend this if you have some additional long-term storage requirements as well. So when we talk about compliance recording, the reporting features in AlienVault USM make it really simple and easy to get the visibility you need to show compliance, show that you are compliant when you have an auditor standing behind you, for instance, and showing that you can maintain continuous security monitoring afterwards in support of those PCI requirements. The USM delivers these out-of-box, these predefined PCI DSS reports, and these map directly to controls, so they're easy to identify, they're descriptive. It's very easy to understand exactly what you're looking at as the auditor is going through their checklist. And of course, you can easily customize any of these predefined reports to tailor it to either a specific request or your specific environments. So when you look at USM Anywhere operating within AWS, we really built it based on that Amazon, that shared security model that Scott mentioned earlier. We're maximizing the visibility of potential threats, really exploiting those AWS security features that we can tie into, like CloudTrail, security groups. As far as how it's deployed, it's based on a 2-tier architecture. So we have sensors that collect and normalize data that are deployed directly in your AWS environment, while the USM Anywhere service that we manage for you, it provides centralized management. It does the analysis, the correlation, alerting, log management, reporting. So all that's handled. And then USM Anywhere, through that sensor that's really purpose-built for AWS, it's there to integrate with AWS services, including CloudWatch and the VPC flow logs. S3, giving insight into who is accessing your AWS storage locations and alerting on abuse patterns, for instance, in Elastic Load Balancing Service, giving you insight into who is trying to access those instances deployed behind them. So, USM Anywhere, it's giving you visibility into the state of your AWS infrastructure, what assets are in your environment, the assets that are misconfigured or vulnerable to exploits, who is using your AWS resources, how are they using them, and understanding malicious activity that's targeting your cloud environment. So really, we like to say it helps you manage security the way you manage your infrastructure by automatically maintaining that inventory of running AWS instances, mapping that security data back to those Amazon instance IDs, so things like alarms, events, vulnerabilities, config issues. We want to make that really easy to tie back so that you get that real cloud forensics and reporting visibility. Now, we talk about, this authenticated scanning to detect vulnerabilities. This is very secure. It's a very low overhead effort that helps you understand exposure, and it helps you prioritize your remediation efforts. The authenticated scanning method we use, it satisfies Amazon scanning policies, so I want to make sure it's very clear this is not the type of scan that would require you get pre-approval, by Amazon. This is completely safe, and I know that we worked with them early on to make sure that what we were doing to detect vulnerabilities complied with their requirements. Now, as far as data collection goes, you can send your logs to USM Anywhere with syslog or use S3 or CloudWatch, as we mentioned before. It provides secure collection and storage for both the raw log data as well as the normalized events, which actually contain the log in them to preserve that chain of custody. And then finally, it performs automated event correlation and alerting based on data coming in from CloudTrail. This is great because it allows us to identify activity including suspicious instance creation or new users, elevation of privileges, and security group modification, for instance. So with that, I did want to, have the pleasure of introducing Jason Harper, who is the CEO and founder at CeloPay. And Jason, please introduce yourself and what CeloPay is about.
Thanks, Ryan. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I'm a huge fan of both the Amazon Web Services and AlienVault, so I'm excited to participate today. Just a little bit about CeloPay. CeloPay was founded in 2011. At the time, our sort of sole mission was to help hotels with a better way to collect payment information. Many of you may have experienced where if you stay at a hotel and perhaps someone else is paying for that, the hotels would send a paper form that requires you to write in your credit card information, and sometimes even send a copy of your credit card back to the hotel via fax or email. And we knew there had to be a better way, and we wanted there to be an easier way for the hotel and for their guests. And that's really how CeloPay came to be. Over the years, we have evolved. We have a plethora of solutions now, from tokenization to payment processing. But the foundation of what's important to us has remained the same, and that is protecting the data that belongs to our customers and ultimately their customers. Our fundamental objective is to make it easy for our customers and their guests alike, while at the same time providing an immensely secure and PCI compliant solution. So that's really what we're about. It's about leveraging the tools that are available to us to provide the best product to our customers that offers them the most security and most bang for their compliance dollars.
Great introduction, Jason. I just want to ask you, what were some of the challenges that you faced as you were faced with PCI compliance and just generally security posture?
They were numerous. I'm sure many of you on the phone today have gone through these same challenges with your own PCI compliance. A little bit about us, even out of the gate, when it was not required that we achieve level 1 compliance, it's something we did even right out of the gate because we felt like it was the right thing to do for our customers and for our own sort of internal well-being. And if you've been through a PCI level 1 audit before, it's pretty intense. There's a lot of information that the auditor requires you to produce. And I've always said one of the most amazing things about Amazon is that there are so many tools and so many pieces of information available to us. almost to our detriment in the beginning when we were trying to get off the ground and achieve our first round of level 1 compliance. It was really cumbersome for us to sort of manually sift through all of that and get what our auditor needed. And I remember our first audit was a month-long process. It took us a long time to sort of get a request, find the data he needed, and get it back to him. It was certainly there, which is a wonderful thing about Amazon Web Services, that there is no shortage of data. You never have to worry about that. But we needed a way to make that faster. We needed a way to bring it all into a single dashboard or a single pane of glass in order to not only help us with our audits, but help us to be more efficient and more proactive all through the year, not just at audit time. And that's one of the things that's really important to us, is that we're not just trying to get from audit to audit. That's not our goal. Our goal is to go above and beyond compliance, again, for the well-being of our customers and their data. So we don't want to just check the boxes of being a PCI Level 1 service provider. We want to live up to that every single minute of every single day. So we needed a solution that would really give us the insight into our environment, into any threats that may exist, into any changes that are occurring, so that we can really live up to those standards every day, not just at audit time. So those were some of the challenges that we were definitely looking to solve.
Yeah, it's such a great point. I'm glad you really drilled that home, that it's about your customers and not just so-called getting through an audit. That's a lot of great context. But you have no shortage of solutions. I know walking around AWS reInvent last week, lots of ideas about how to best meet PCI compliance. Why did you choose AlienVault with the choices that you had?
Yeah, no, there were lots of reasons, and when we first set out to find a solution, I'll be honest, it was agonizing. There were a lot of options on the market. They ran the gamut in terms of features and sort of time in the marketplace. But really, what led us to AlienVault were several things. First, it was one product. Many of the solutions that we looked at would provide a piece of what we needed, and they would do that fairly well. But they didn't have everything that we needed, and we really were hoping to find sort of one tool that did everything we needed. That way, it's one tool to deploy. It's obviously one cost for one tool. It's one place to look for everything, and AlienVault delivered that with USM. It truly does, sort of under one roof, if you will, have everything that we need to help us with that PCI posture. Deployment had to be easy. We all know that things are really easy with Amazon to deploy, so we're kind of spoiled by that. And we wanted something that was easy for us to get up and running. Didn't want to have to dedicate a ton of resources or time to this project. And again, AlienVault delivered on that. We were literally up and running in under 2 hours. I distinctly remember when it was time for us to sort of go live with this, we had blocked off like a week and a half to kind of just focus on getting this online. And we went home after the end of the first day, and we were up and running and getting events and alerts and all kind of shocked at how quickly and easily it went. So very easy to deploy, especially in partnership with Amazon. Affordability was key. We're a relatively small organization. As the leader of that organization, I prefer to spend my dollars in servicing our customers and making our product better. But I certainly recognize that PCI and security compliance in general is a large portion of our organization. So we know we have to spend there, but we want to minimize those costs as much as possible. And that's why an affordable solution like AlienVault was important to us. We wanted something that was reasonably priced, that did all the things we needed, but that wouldn't sort of break the bank or feel like such a chore to have to pay for every month or every year. And that's one of the key reasons we landed with AlienVault as well. And then finally, low maintenance was key. Again, kind of spoiled by AWS, but because USM is SaaS, again, there was really nothing for us to do, and I think that's why one of the reasons the deployment was so easy and so quick. It was really just a couple of clicks, nothing for us to really get involved with or do. No maintenance, no upgrades. AlienVault handles all of that for us, and again, that's fantastic from a company's perspective when we're trying to push the majority of our resources into servicing our customers and not managing infrastructure. So that's a great thing for us. And then just one thing that's not on the slide, but it is a story I like to tell, particularly for those on the phone that might have similar values. I like to pride myself and CeloPay on being a very customer-centric organization. I'm a firm believer that no customer is too small or too large. We have an ear for all of them. So I like to talk to our customers regularly. I like to reach out to them. I like to be involved in sales calls or demos. I like to understand what's going on. And one thing that I distinctly remember very, very shortly after we had signed up with AlienVault, we had opened a support case about a feature. It was a relatively benign support request. And it turns out that feature that we were looking for didn't exist. And within a day, my phone rang, and it was actually Ryan on the other end of that line. And as the product manager, I was so impressed that he actually called and was interested to know about the feature that I was requesting and was interested to learn more about our use case, and would take that back to his team. And that level of personal touch, I personally believe, is invaluable. You know, in the scheme of things, I'm sure we're a relatively small AlienVault customer, and the fact that the product manager took the time to call a guy that had been using their solution for a week and to try to understand what we were trying to do was huge. So, you know, if we hadn't signed up at that point, we would have, because I share a similar value that I will always talk to any customer, and I'm always interested to learn what they think of our product and how we can make it better. And one of the things that I really enjoy about the AlienVault partnership is that we're definitely on the same page there. We're mutually interested in making things great. So that's not a bullet point on here, but I do think it's worth sharing because it was important to us in the decision-making process.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Jason. I tell you, yeah, I think we are kindred spirits there, you know, as a company for sure. And you know, as I said before, you are the reason we exist. I mean, you know, companies that need to do more with less. So it's great to hear you say that. But you know, now turning the page a little bit, so we're past the honeymoon period, you know, and you've made that selection. It was easy to install. But then when you look back, I mean, what were can you touch on some of the benefits that you gained using USM?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we talked about how cumbersome it was to sort of pull all of this data together. And we now have that, of course, with the centralized log portion of USM. So it takes all of this fantastic information generated by our hosts, by AWS services, by all of those different things that we have going on, and puts them into a single place for us to see all of that information. And it's a lot, but it doesn't feel like a lot because it's so easily accessible through the management console. So that's something, of course, we rely on, you know, every single day, and it's a really great place to see everything happening in the environment. Certainly with our compliance audits particularly, it's immensely helpful. I mentioned earlier the first time we went through this, it was a months-long process. Quite literally, the auditor would make a request, and a week later we would respond. You know, after we would find the data that he needed. It was just a slow and arduous process. And if any of you have been through that before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Just a few months ago, we just wrapped up our current annual audit, and we finished that audit in 4 days, which to me is pretty remarkable. Certainly we're a little more practiced at how this goes every year, but being able to get information as he needs it is amazing. We literally can do that in real time. So if he's sitting with us or we're screen sharing, rather than him making a request and we return to him a week later, we literally will go get the information at that time in real time, which, as you can imagine, just, you know, makes the audit, you know, pass so very quickly because he's not waiting on us to generate anything. So very powerful in terms of finding the data that you need. And again, not just for an audit. If you're investigating activity around a certain user's activity or certain antivirus updates or whatever happens to be relevant to your environment, again, the ability to narrow that information down in a matter of seconds is pretty invaluable. And then, of course, kind of tied in with that, you get the full security visibility and alerting. Another sort of anecdote I like to tell is that several months back, we made a change to one of our security groups, which is something we so rarely do. And, you know, within minutes, we've got alerts and emails going off, you know, throughout the company, letting us know security alert or security groups had changed on AWS. And for a moment, it kind of put us on high alert, and everyone started trying to kick into gear to see what was going on until, of course, we realized that it was something that we had just done. We just do it so infrequently, we weren't really prepared for the alerts. But it's a great example of how sort of having this tool in the background is invaluable, because when something does happen in your environment, when there is a change to your environment, you're going to know about it. Even if you invoked it yourself, you will know about it. So that gives us a great amount of peace of mind to know that any changes or any alerts or any critical issues with our environment, we're going to know about those in near real time.
Got it. Great overview, Jason. Thanks again. I did want to ask, Scott's been awfully quiet. I wanted to see if he had any additional questions for Jason about the deployment and just some of the, as he worked through, these compliance requirements.
Yeah. No, awesome story, Jason. I always love hearing kind of your side of it. It's great to hear the kind of the customer obsession part, and as people probably know, that's kind of how AWS operates as well. Most of our roadmap is actually based on feedback that we get from customers, and so being able to hear a story where that's kind of happening top to bottom, where the AWS, the partner, and the customer are all kind of focused on the customer and are getting their results based on the feedback from the customer is awesome to hear. Jason, I'm kind of curious. You mentioned that things get a lot easier. I'm not sure if I caught it or not. I apologize if you said it, but like, how are you able to do more with less? Like, I'm assuming that you have limited human resources. How many humans are you able to actually kind of accomplish this with, and what are they able to do now that maybe they weren't able to do before, as far as growing your business?
That's a great question. So yeah, as I mentioned before, it is really important obviously it's important that we invest in our security posture and the teams to support that. But of course, I think any business owner would rather put their resources into improving their product and servicing their customers. And our strategy is the same. So before this solution, it was definitely at least one or two full-time roles just to kind of manage and monitor and parse log information from the environment and make sure that all the right things are happening. Now, I don't want to necessarily say it's set it and forget it, because that's not the case. You do have to still, of course, be aware of it. But it isn't even a part-time role to do that. It's an hour or two a day of someone taking a look at all the information, looking at any alerts that may have surfaced in the dashboard, responding to anything that might be critical in real time. So it really does sort of parse down the human capital that's needed to sort of monitor this environment down to almost nothing, because the tools are doing that for you. And of course, over time, as you really start to learn your own environment and you start to learn the capabilities of USM and AWS, you can really start to fine-tune the alerts and notifications so that it does sort of take care of itself and notify you of anything that might be relevant to your organization. So yeah, Scott, I would say that it's definitely helped us to reinvest resources in what's important to us, and that's focusing on the customer and not having such a large security and compliance team that has to sort of manually parse this information every day.
Awesome. Very cool to hear. That's great. That's great to hear. So we're going to move into some other Q&A. We're getting some good questions here, and this first one is kind of really for Ryan and Jason. As much as you can talk about, some people are curious. You mentioned being able to get feedback from AlienVault and get some additional features that you wanted. Did you actually get the feature that you were looking for at the end of the day, or how much can we share on that one?
It turns out no, but it turns out it wasn't required. There were other ways to accomplish what we were looking for. So once we had a chance to go through the use case and really drill down into that, which again, that's why that act of picking up the phone to talk through that. Certainly not that AlienVault support probably couldn't have handled that, but just to talk to somebody that knew the product, of course, like the back of his hand, to help us solve that was huge. So great question. At the end of the day, though, it was not required.
Okay, excellent. And Ryan, I'm going to throw this next question to you. We've gotten several questions kind of around the pricing model for AlienVault. And I know you probably have a public page on that, but maybe you could talk a little bit more on what that model looks like, and then even go a little bit beyond of there's some questions around like number of sensors needed based on your environment. Do you have some guidance around that?
Yeah, sure. Definitely there's a nice pricing page, but the short answer is, it's a consumption model, but that's very simple. So we base the service pricing on the amount of data that you expect to consume per month, and we start at 250 gigabyte per month and go up in kind of natural increments. The pricing starts at $650 a month and kind of goes from there based on how much monitoring you need, and we can work with you and easily help you scope that. And again, I think we'll share a link to our pricing page where you can easily just use a slider and it'll give you a breakdown. There's also kind of a good, better, best slice as far as functionality and the dimension, and we typically steer most of our customers like the middle standard tier, which provides some additional orchestration capabilities. And then, the second part of Scott's question was, what about the sensors? How do those fit in? The sensors are deployed locally to get data directly out of your AWS environment. So the rule of thumb is, we will stick a sensor in every AWS account that you want to monitor, and that sends data back to the USM Anywhere service. So great question.
Awesome. Quick clarification here that I'm going to add is kind of a question, but just to clarify, AlienVault is not a part of AWS. AlienVault is a partner of AWS, so they are building a solution that runs on top of and leverages the AWS platform to provide security for other customers, but they are not a part of our AWS. They're an independent company. Question for, let's start with Ryan again, but it's kind of receiving daily vulnerability reports from USM Anywhere. I've used the product some, and I certainly know that you have the ability to perform and collect that information. But what's kind of the option of kind of receiving reports on a daily basis? What do customers have available to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you know, you can go in and export vulnerability reports. We're actually, that's something that we're actually working on now. As we get a lot of feedback from customers, including ourselves. AlienVault, we use our own product to support our own PCI efforts, and so we have internal customers saying, hey, I'd like to get daily reports, and that's something that we're working on. And in fact, it's part of our roadmap, and I expect us to deliver shortly and make it even easier so that you do get that list of daily results, as well as being able to see a more of a daily report on other issues as well, including alarms or other event data that you want to see.
Okay, cool. This next one is around some deeper setup of AlienVault. So we have a customer who had some challenges with their last PCI audit around log retention and integrity of the log files. And what they're trying to understand is, do you guys have kind of a AlienVault? Do you have consider or can you talk more about having a secure logging solution to facilitate ingestion of syslog, audit-d, RDS, MongoDB log files so that you can actually meet the retention and integrity requirements of PCI?
Yes, I just want to understand the question. Sure. So is the question, how would USM Anywhere support log collection and retention from various data sources? Is that...
Yeah, well, and how is it kind of how is it meeting the requirements of PCI itself?
Sorry, good question.
Integrity requirements that PCI requires when those log files are given.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the short answer is we actually built USM Anywhere with those retention requirements in mind. So, PCI, there's this need of being able to have data readily available for searching and reporting, and there's a 90-day requirement. And so we have an option that has that event data for reporting and searching and so forth by default for 90 days. And then to meet the 12-month requirement of log retention. So again, there is a kind of a general purpose log collection and retention capability, and those raw logs are stored for 12 months by default, which would meet that PCI requirement. If you do need to have additional retention, you have some other requirements or just business need, we can easily extend that 12 months to support additional time. So yeah, it's a good question.
Awesome. This one probably can be addressed both by Jason and Ryan. I'd love to hear from Jason first on this one. And so we have an attendee who's just getting familiar with PCI, and as we know, there's many controls that exist. Could you elaborate a little bit on what fraction of the PCI controls you felt or were addressed by AlienVault, or that you were able to actually kind of cover out of the overall number of controls that exist? And then Ryan, you can maybe tack onto that as well.
Yeah, sure. Gosh, that without really like diving into that's hard to give you a number of controls. What I'll say is that it helps with many of the controls, right? So whether it's log management, file integrity monitoring, host intrusion detection, there's so many elements of PCI that in one way or another, the combination of AWS and AlienVault can touch or to help you satisfy that requirement. Certainly, it's not 100% of them. There are a lot that falls onto you in the shared responsibility model. But I mean, I'm just trying to think of our recent experience with the audit, and there were, I mean, just time and time and time again, we kept going back to the AlienVault dashboard to get data. So if I were guessing, I'd say we used it for at least half of our requirements. But I'm sorry, it's tough to quantify on the fly. But to say that we used it extensively during our audit would be a very accurate statement.
Ryan, anything you would tack onto that from your experience with other customers as well?
Yeah, I think that's about right. I mean, if you back up and you think about the multiple things you need to do, it's not just about collecting and showing logs, right? There's a vulnerability component. A lot of the controls, require you to show how are you tracking vulnerabilities. It's not just about audit events. And so I think again, I don't know if it's 63%. I tell you, I could. we did another webinar with our own security team on how they used our product, and that's a really good question. So I can't put a specific percentage on it, but I think just by the fact that it is covering some additional areas versus just log collection as a lot of other solutions, it's going to be relatively more of those controls that apply. I mean, certainly some of them are going to be around administration, and we can't go out and physically do some of the tasks that are asked because those are just administrative. But as far as the data collection and reporting, there's relatively more that you can do just because it is unified monitoring.
Awesome. Great information. This one's a little interesting. So there's a question around integrating, hardware security modules on-prem, and I'll maybe take a stab at this first, and then Ryan, you can add anything that you may have on this one. I can certainly say from an AWS perspective, if you have an on-prem hardware security module, if you implement some sort of that, that I talked about that, a direct connect or a VPN connection, you can certainly extend your network to be able to access that at HSM if you're running on AWS, or if you want, you can have a cloud HSM implementation in AWS where you can actually sync your on-prem HSM with your HSM running in AWS and leverage that with your applications. But I think beyond that, and with this AlienVault story, I'd be kind of curious. I'm certainly, I know that, an HSM is probably putting out log files that can be consumed by AlienVault. But outside of log files, anything specific around HSMs that AlienVault deals with or provides for customers, Ryan?
Yeah, I think you hit it. I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, I think as long as we can ingest logs, and if we can't today, we can build data parsers very easily for any new type of integration. We're constantly seeing new products and we have a legacy and the on-premise environment, so it's no problem to be able to consume not just HSM, but more traditional firewalls. If you do still have an on-premise environment and you're in the process of migrating to AWS, you're not quite all in. We can definitely support collection of those on-premise data sources as well, and you will go up and log in and see that data alongside your AWS monitored data with USM Anywhere. So that is something that we didn't touch on much because we wanted to focus on AWS, of course. But if you do have some other on-prem environments, we make it really easy to pull that data right alongside your AWS information.
Okay, excellent. I have a question here to kind of help clarifying a little bit of the pricing discussion we had. So earlier on, you talked about one sensor per account. Ryan, could you help clarify if it's per account, or if it's one sensor per CloudTrail and then one sensor for CloudWatch and one sensor for VPC flow logs, or how much can a sensor actually cover when you say one sensor per account?
Oh yeah, good question. So it really is clean. We don't break sensors out by service. So it really is, with our customer base, it's very simple. Well, one sensor in that AWS account does everything, including your vulnerability detection, S3 access log collection, ELB. If you have syslogs you're sending over, the log events and vulnerabilities. All contain anything in that one account, including if you have multiple VPCs. The only thing, of course, is as long as you have some VPC peering set up and it's possible for us to reach across VPC boundaries as part of your routed architecture, not a problem. That single sensor deployed in that account can cover all that ground.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Next question here, I think, which I'll chime in on as well, is how quickly does AWS make available that log and audit data that CeloPay is using, and then follow up to that is how quickly is AlienVault actually processing and making that available for customers. So I'll start with so services like CloudTrail and VPC flow logs are currently delivering that data within 15 minutes of the event happening. So every 15 minutes. We're getting that data and making it available for customers to use and consume, and then at that point it's up to the customer or the partner solution to consume it from there. I will tell you that certainly it's one of the common feedbacks we get from customers is how could we make that delivery time shorter, and so being a company that works on customer feedback, we are more than likely looking into that somehow to shorten that amount of time, but right now it is a 15-minute window, and then for the non-AWS services, certainly, anything that a customer's running, it's really kind of dependent on how quickly their application is creating log files and how quickly they can ship them off. So on the Ryan or the AlienVault side, kind of once that data is available, what's kind of the turnaround time on the AlienVault side?
Yeah, so we can definitely the way that USM Anywhere, that sensor that's deployed in your AWS account, we have a job schedule that goes out and fetches logs periodically from various locations, and you can configure how often. There's obviously a default setting. It's by default. I was looking in our system. Our CloudTrail default is every 5 minutes. So probably sounds like we could just make that 15 minutes. But if you wanted to go down and you guys are putting the data there more frequently, we can go all the way down and look at that spot every 5 minutes if needed, or schedule it upwards every 15. It's really up to you.
Cool. Jason, I have an awesome question here for you. So you apart from cutting 2 full-time jobs down to a couple of hours, can you is there any way that you can assess money saved on a PCI DSS certification using USM? Anything you can give to that in a general term that you're willing to share?
Sure. I mean, just in general terms, the speed of audit, which helps you save in 2 ways, right? It helps save the human capital required in the company to sort of participate and provide the data for that audit. So shrinking that from a couple of months, process to a matter of days, certainly is a huge savings in terms of, not having to have those resources or having those resources focused on other things. At least with our auditing firm, the audit is cheaper for us because we're able to provide the information so quickly, so we take less of the auditor's time and tie him up less focusing on us, so we save. That's a tangible savings to us there. And then, just sort of being able to support our compliance policies throughout the year using these tools, again, that doesn't take a full-time person or 2 to focus on those is huge. So, I can't quantify it into dollars off the top of my head, but again, and it's depending on your organization's scale, that could add up very, very quickly in terms of security resources or being able to repurpose those folks on developing your product or interacting with your customers. So there's certainly a combination, at least for us, of tangible and non-tangible savings or benefits to using a solution like this.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Thanks so much. We're going to give you one last question here, and then we're going to close it out here. Ryan, as far as USM, how configurable is it in being able to add more events, alerts, etc.? Because nothing's going to be right out of the box 100% ready for every customer. How configurable is this as a customer comes on and wants to kind of make this work for their particular use cases?
Yeah, great question. You know, so we definitely have as many presets as possible because, you know, I'll answer generally and then we can talk specifics. You know, we built this product with people like Jason in mind. We don't assume you've got lots of time and lots of staff to go and you know, tune a lot of knobs and squelch things and, you know, and write a lot of rules. So, you know, I will tell you that and Jason's probably I know we're running out of time, but you know, there is, I think, with the preset configuration, the out-of-box correlation rules that are already written for you for things like CloudTrail, there's not much for you to do. I mean, a simple onboarding a sequence of 5 quick setup wizard screens gets you through the basic log collection steps. And from that point, you're collecting data, and I would say you're at least doing a first-order monitoring of your AWS environment. You're getting, you know, the essential logs environmentally. You know, I think then when you go out to the host level, there's an additional level of monitoring that you can add. And as far as data, you know, we're very mindful and you know, budgeting, and you know, we do know we charge by consumption, and so we only want to store and correlate what's value to you. So we give you a lot of flexibility. And it's quite easy to go in and understand, you know, for this particular data source, it's generating a lot of noisy events. You can easily drop and filter out, you know, let's say informational events or even certain types of CloudTrail may just be informational depending on your security and compliance needs. You may not need to know about a lot of read activity. And so you can just simply, at the event type level, go, you know, do a quick filter by size, relative amount of events, eliminate those, and then those don't count. So I think both on the, you know, how you're paying for the service, you want to give you the most value and make sure that the data is genuinely important to you and not just a lot of noise. And then as far as getting it up and running, you know, again, we really did base it. All the dashboards in the product are, you know, ready to go out of box. There's like, I think 5 or 6 for AWS. But then again, if you do want to do some additional customization, you do have those abilities to customize and change.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ryan. So that does wrap up our time today. I just want to give a quick shout out to some next steps. If you're looking for further information, you can certainly check out AlienVault at the AWS Marketplace on this slide here. You can learn more about AlienVault itself at the AlienVault website, and you're welcome to go into AWS itself if haven't done it yet. And you can certainly, there's a free tier to start trying out AWS for your particular use cases or business needs. So I'd like to really thank Ryan and Jason for their participation. It's always an awesome discussion with you guys, and I think you've helped us make a great webinar. So thanks so much for your attendance. And I'd like to thank everybody else who attended today. Thank you for joining in, and I hope you were able to learn something new. And with that, we will close it out today. So thanks, everybody, and have a great day.